The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning. It is Thursday. It is December 29th. It is 5 a.m. alongside Tolly Anderson.
17 News is your local election headquarters, and the recounting of ballots is in the 16th State Senate District race continues. Republican candidate David Shepard challenged election results earlier this month, and by state law is paying for the cost of the recount. And remember how close this race was? It was just 20 votes separating Senator Melissa Hurtado from her Republican challenger. Our 17's Michaela Armstrong has more on this.
None of us here have been through a recount, so we weren't really sure what that would look like.
Kern County Registrar of Voters Amy Espinoza says the county elections office pulled ballots from 185 out of some 220 polling precincts as requested by David Shepard.
At the beginning, we did think we might be able to get done in a couple of days. However, the sorting did take us much longer than anticipated.
Election integrity has been a big question throughout the entire election process, and Espinoza says during this recount process, ballots were explicitly checked.
The ballots as they were being pulled out were double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked to make sure that we pulled out every single ballot that was requested in this recount.
Fresno County's recount shows David Shepard as the winner in the county, gaining 2 votes with Hurtado losing 1. In Kern, there was no change in results, which could be a signal of trouble for Shepard.
That is bad news for Mr. Shepard, because more than likely it's going to be difficult to find more of those Shepard votes than it is to find more Hurtado votes.
However, until the other 2 counties finalize its recount results, the conclusion to the race still looms.
That was Michaela Armstrong reporting. Now from the 17 follow-up file. The coroner has released the names of the 2 men who shot and killed each other on Christmas Eve in Southwest Bakersfield. Those men are Jacob Molina and Tanner Marlowe. Our 17's Marco Torres has been following this story since Christmas Eve, and he reports now from Snowden Avenue with the latest.
This is the home where police say the Christmas Eve shooting occurred. Now 17 News spoke with Jacob Molina's father about Jacob and his side of the story.
2 men, both dead on Christmas Eve. One was Tanner Marlowe, a 30-year-old undefeated mixed martial arts fighter, also known as the American Psycho, according to his Facebook profile. The other person identified as Jacob Molina, a 30-year-old father of 4, according to his GoFundMe page. His father, Jason Molina, tells 17 News Jacob was a family man who loved his 4 kids unconditionally. Jason Molina tells us Jacob was married but separated. He says his son was also in a relationship with another woman who was staying with Jacob at his Snowden home. The father says the relationship was strained, but that the girlfriend told him he was planning to come to the Christmas Eve dinner the father was hosting. As for Tanner Marlowe, he was sued in May for allegedly beating and breaking the nose and ankle of a customer at a sports bar where Marlowe was a bouncer. Marlowe was very vocal on his Facebook page, which has posts and comments about women. Just 4 weeks ago, he wrote, "I've always been fated to be murdered by a woman who loves me a little too much." Marlowe is described by his family on his GoFundMe page as a fun, loving cousin who was taken away from us suddenly at the hands of another on Christmas Eve.
Details are still emerging from friends and family members on both sides. Now, police have yet to answer any of our questions about the ongoing case. Links to both Tanner Marlowe's and Jacob Molina's GoFundMe pages can be found on our website at kget.com. From Southwest Bakersfield, Marco Torres, 17 News.
It has now been almost 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russian forces continue to fire missiles on the southern city of Kherson in Ukraine. While the front lines appear to be somewhat static despite intense fighting, NBC's Matt Bradley reports from Kyiv, Ukraine, and has the latest on this conflict.
Well, the southern city of Kherson has endured relentless bombing over the past week. Just overnight, there was about 24 Russian projectiles launched at the city. This comes after dozens more hit the city earlier this week. Now, this is a city that only 6 weeks ago was liberated by the Ukrainians, and it was one of the only real major cities that Russia was able to occupy throughout its offensive that started in late January. The Russians essentially walked away from the city after facing pressure from the Ukrainians all around it. And from what we understand, the Russians repositioned their forces in the eastern city, or around the eastern city of Bakhmut, and that's on the fringes of the Donbass region. Bakhmut, despite all of the attacks in Kherson, Bakhmut has really become the heart of the most fiercest fighting in this war over the past several weeks. This has been 5 months of battle in Bakhmut. It's one of the longest battles of this entire war, and that's a city where there really is not that much else to destroy. It's just relentless back and forth. The Ukrainians have been ceding some ground to the Russians there over the past several days, but very little. The Russians have only made modest advances there. But from what we understand, a little bit north of Bakhmut, the Ukrainians have been circling around the city of Kreminna. We thought a couple of days ago that they might have actually taken Kreminna, but it turns out that they're just within striking distance of that city. But we got to remember, in this part of the country, the fighting has been relentless, very fierce. There's been a lot of casualties, and yet the battle lines haven't really shifted at all. And that's why President Zelensky and others here in the Ukrainian government really do believe that this war needs a game changer. As this city and parts of the country are really suffering from power outages thanks to Russia's relentless bombardment of electricity infrastructure for the past several weeks and months. That's why when President Zelensky was just recently in Washington, he got a lot of the stuff on his Christmas list then, including those Patriot missile systems, but he's going to be asking for more, again, because the front lines in this conflict remain almost completely static. But if more weapons do come to bear, then that could mean a game changer. And a lot of Russians, Vladimir Putin, might believe that he has more cards to play in the form of recently mobilized soldiers. But right now, the battle lines are almost completely frozen. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
It's every parent's worst nightmare, but losing a child to a drug overdose has become an all too common in the U.S. And these days, more often than not, the culprit is fentanyl. Morgan Radford with more on this worrying trend.
When Tanya Niederman lost her son JJ, he was just 19 years old.
He ingested cocaine and he had enough fentanyl in his system to kill 30 grown adults.
A tragic story that's becoming increasingly common. Overdoses among teens ages 14 to 18 now reaching a record high, surging 133% in just 2 years. The vast majority of them caused by fentanyl, a drug that's often found in fake pills made to resemble prescription drugs like oxycodone, Xanax, or even Adderall. That's why here at Highland Regional High School in Camden County, New Jersey,
break the glass, remove the Narcan.
They're bringing a new solution to the students.
Is it almost like a fire extinguisher? You just break glass if necessary?
That's exactly what it is.
The school district is installing 175 overdose kits just like this one across high schools countywide. Each one stocked with naloxone, a drug that can actually reverse opioid overdoses. Nationwide, at least 20 states have laws allowing schools to stock naloxone, training staff and even some students on how to use it.
We are going all hands on deck because it's such a prominent drug throughout our community.
Data is showing that the number of overdoses among teens is going up, but the drug use among teens is actually going down. How do you square that data?
We believe that's because of the strength of fentanyl. Just a few grams of fentanyl can kill someone. And we think the fact that fentanyl is now being mixed in with the drugs that are being used is attributing to the higher rate of the deaths.
Those fatal mixes, the Drug Enforcement Administration says, often finding their way into students' hands through social media.
People set up accounts specifically towards catering to people who are willing to buy drugs.
Online?
Yes, online.
A chain of events parents like Tanya Niederman hope to prevent any way possible.
What about parents who feel like putting these naloxone kits in schools is just going too far, that it sends the wrong message about drugs?
I think it's with anything. I mean, you know, kids who are allergic to peanuts, they have EpiPens in school. Like, why not have it available for people that may need to have it? Because I truly think that you don't know what's going on in the bathroom. You don't know what happened in the car in the parking lot. If this is a way to keep kids from dying, then so be it.
A new tool in the fight against overdoses, reaching a younger generation. Morgan Radford, NBC News, New York.
Kern County Sheriff's Department has lost one of its best. Gary Davis, who was a sergeant in the homicide division, as well as search and rescue, died December 20th at the age of 76 after a long fight with Parkinson's disease and other ailments, his family said. Now, Davis grew up in Wasco and Tehachapi, where he was student body president. He and his twin brother Jerry both worked in law enforcement. Kern County Sheriff's Donnie Youngblood remembered Gary Davis as an intelligent but caring cop.
Gary was very compassionate. He empathized with people really well. He worked homicide for a long time. And when he interviewed a homicide suspect and or victims, you couldn't tell which was which because of his demeanor. And he could empathize with both and get what he wanted out of the suspect. He was remarkable.
Gary Davis is survived by his wife of 57 years, Mary, his daughter Stacy, and her family, numerous grandchildren, and his dog Wesley. Remembrance may be made to the Michael J. Fox Foundation at his request, and no service will be held.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.